Hi guys, Sai here and welcome back to the second episode of Beyond Binary. Today we are looking at inversion, the maximum function, the minimum function, the modulo function based a certain number, the inversion is also based on a certain number as well, the most basic subtraction and addition, and then we'll look at an application of this, all the more technical stuff. So the first thing we probably need to do is to come over here and look at how we're going to create certain signal strengths. Rather than making a really long wire and putting a input at one end, we can now use comparisons to measure the amount of items in a chest or anything with an inventory. Furnace would probably be useful for this, but we can use item hoppers, which have a very small inventory, provided we don't stick anything next to them for the items to fall into, of course. And if you want an output of 7, this is what you want, 2 stacks and 16. That will create an output of 7 from it. It's probably not exactly the number, but it's convenient to remember. 8 is created by 2.5 stacks, and these are both going to be useful when we're using base 8. And then if you wanted to use base 4, say, you'll get an output of 3 from 1 stack, and 1.5 stacks should give you 4, yes. And then obviously if you want 15 for working with base 16, you could just stick a redstone block there. Really. So yeah, the first thing we're going to look at is inversion. And inversion, if we're using more than just binary, is always base a certain number. So here we've got this hopper full. So this is giving you a strength of 15 in the rear side of this comparator, and this will be inversion in hexadecimal. So if we just stick a little wire out here to see, the inversion of 15 in hexadecimal is 0, and then 14 gives you 1. So you're looking at the difference between your current input and the output and the maximum possible inside one. It's not 1 bit because it's binary. I don't know if it's called a hex for hexadecimal or something, or an oct. It's convenient terminology for me at least. But yeah, here you're getting the inversion with respect to 15. Technically, I suppose it's respect to 16. I don't know. No, 15. 15 works. And if you wanted to do this for octal, you would take out this stack and put 16 in there and do that. And now we can get the inversion with respect to octal. Obviously, if you put in a signal of 15 to this, you're going to get 0, and you're also going to get 0 from a signal of 14 to this. Anything higher than 7 will give you a signal of 0 here, because we've just got an output of 7. Actually, even 6. But basically, all you need to know for the inversion is that you're subtracting the input from the largest possible value for this single term, I suppose. Maximum is a very simple function. You can probably tell how this works. We're just broadcasting all of the signals. Broadcasting? That's not really a good word to use here. We're transmitting all of the signals into the same place. I've used these comparators here just to get the inputs in a nice position, but you can stick them around the sides, up above. There's loads and loads of signals you can connect to a single output to measure the largest of, and that's all this does. It outputs the largest inputted value, which isn't really saying much. You could just run them into the same wire. Now, to output the smallest inputted value, we've got to put a bit more work into this. Here we're using hexadecimal, so we've got inputs of strength 15 on all sides, and basically we're inverting all of the inputs. So we're using this over here, and we're saying invert them base 16 first, and then take the largest inverted value, because this is a maximum. And the largest inverted value will correspond to the smallest non-inverted value. And then, because this is an inverted value, we've got to invert it again. Note that this block doesn't transmit into the side of this comparator. This is convenient. The only way you can subtract with a comparator or compared to is by direct redstone wire into. You can't even put redstone wire into a block on the side of it. So yeah, we're inverting the largest inverted signal, which is basically saying that the output is the smallest input signal. And we can see this if we put 15 here. 15 and 0, the smallest of those is 0. 15 and 15, the smallest is 15, and then 0 again. And we can pull this back if we particularly wish to show that. And we can get smaller values, ramping up to 15 there. But yeah, again, fairly simple. I should point out at this point that you can actually do this slightly faster. This is a 2-tick apparatus, or it should be if all things are even. And this is a 1-tick apparatus, which performs the same function, but is a lot larger. This is the old style. I did actually develop most of the system in this style, using horrible transmission lines that look like this, though are slightly faster. Just like in a couple of nights before the comparator got released, so it was a bit of a waste of time really. But you can see that, oh wow, that was loud. You can see what's happening here essentially. The first signal comes up, and the higher it is, the further it will extend. So say we've got a signal input of 13, it'll come to this block here. This will be the last one, so it'll open up all of these gates here. And then if the signal below is higher, then it'll only transmit to the highest value of the one above, because it won't be able to transmit when the gates aren't open. And if it's lower, it'll only transmit its own value, because obviously it won't reach to emit higher. So yeah, this works as a minimum gate, and that works in 1 tick, but I wouldn't suggest using it really. Okay, so for the next things, we're going to look at the basic, subtraction and addition, and we're not really going to look at the basic subtraction too much because you've already seen this in use. Yeah, it's using a comparator for the subtract function. Addition, though, is slightly more complicated. I have a sign over here which explains it. So say our output, which is Q, we're using Q for the output in the orange, is equal to A plus B, which are our inputs. We can say at the same time that the inverse of Q is equal to the inverse of A minus B, or the inverse of B minus A. The important thing here is that you're subtracting the non-inverted input from the inverted input. And if we look up here, that's what we're doing. We're subtracting this, which is a non-inverted input, from this, which is an inverted input. And then we're inverting the output, because we don't want the inverted output, which we get down here. And we can see this working. So if we have 1, maybe 2, 3, 4 on this side, that gives an output of 4, plus 1 is 5, plus 3 is 7, 4 is 8. Now obviously, this being the most basic form of addition, suffers from overflow. That is, if the output of A plus B is more than 15, we're just going to get 15, because there's nowhere for the output to go. We've not built anything like that into the system so far. So yeah, it's not a stunning amount of use, except in basic circumstances. We'll get on to the full addition, full subtraction, and carrying and stuff next week, and I don't know, see if I've figured out multiplication by then. Okay, so the final gate that we're going to be looking at today before a example is the Modulus Gate, and I'm probably going to have to build this one because it's a little bit more complicated to get it. I think this is a fairly compact version, but I'm not entirely sure. And yes, this isn't technically working a full modulus. I'll explain what it's doing now. We've got a comparator here, which is transmitting if the input is greater than 8, or greater than or equal to 8. since we've got a hopper here and a comparator outputting a signal strength of 8. So if this is greater than or equal to 8, the input, this extends, and this is also transmitting 8, and it takes 8 off it. So if it's 8, it becomes 0. If it's 9, it becomes 1. 13 becomes 5. And this is the most basic form of modulus, except it's not really a modulus, because if we were somehow able to input, say, 27 into it, it would only give us 19. So it's not quite working modulus. Now, if you want to know what a modulus is, and you don't know modular arithmetic, the easiest way to explain it is to look at a clock face. If I told you to add 5 hours onto 8 o'clock, what would you get? You wouldn't get 13 o'clock unless you were military. You would end up with 1 o'clock. And this is the most basic form of modular arithmetic. We say that a clock is that 2 times on a clock are equivalent modulus 12 if they look the same. So 1 o'clock in the afternoon is equivalent to 1 o'clock in the morning. We're talking an analog clock at the moment, a 12-hour analog clock. I'm just looking at a completely incongruous analog clock in my house. We've just inherited a grandmother clock and it does not look right in the room. But yeah, so 1 o'clock in the afternoon is equivalent to 1 o'clock in the morning, base 12. And that is a simple explanation, but it also means that 1 o'clock 2.5 years from now at 1 in the morning is the same as equivalent to 1 o'clock now. And obviously there's a lot of hours passed in between there, so we're having to take off 12 hours a lot of times, and this doesn't have the capacity for that. This can only take off 12 hours once. I mean 8 once. You can expand this to higher bases, but I can't really see that you'd want to. This is most useful for addition in octal. Or you can drop it down to 4 in these to say any signals higher than 4, take 4 off it. But yeah, you just show this working. So we've got 1 equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I missed out counting 1 there, but yeah, we've got 7 down there and 7 up here. And then, if we think 8 is greater than or equal to 8, so we're going to take 8 off it. So you can see it momentarily flashes 8, unfortunately, and then drops down to 0. And then we get the same here, 1, 2, 3, 7, oh no, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7 gives us 7. And yeah, this is really useful. I suppose I should go and build this now, so I'll do that, and then we will hop over to a basic demonstration of why this is useful. Okay, let's build the modulus function. The first thing well, the basic modulus function at least. First thing you need is up here an input. So we say this is the input, and then we start off like this and build a little V shape here, whoops, with a comparator in here on subtract mode. And then we extend both of these, and we build a little bit of a zigzag down here, like so. Then come 1 out here, and 1 block up here. Now we put a comparator here, redstone under here. This is just a comparator on normal mode. A sticky piston up here with a block on it, and redstone here. Then a block out here with a comparator, and if we can stick a hopper behind this one and a hopper here, and then another comparator here again on normal mode. Now we have everything set up, and we want to put 2.5 stacks in here. Oh, and the same amount in here. This is for modulo 8. And then if we take our output out from here. And that should be it. If we just test this out. That'll that'll be past the switch point. There we're getting an output that's more than 5. And you can see there we're getting our outputs of 1, 0, and a high output from here. Okay, so yeah, that's working. And now we will hop over to the demonstration of why this is a useful thing. Okay, so for the example, we're going to look at rock, paper, scissors. Now, this probably doesn't look anything like any rock, paper, scissors game you've seen before, and there's a good reason for this. Normally, in rock, paper, scissors, to make it, which tends to be a sort of like fairly beginner project for advanced redstone, you have a decoder, and you put the 2 lines into the decoder, and you say that certain combinations win, certain combinations lose, and certain combinations draw. And this gets very big, especially when you want to extend it to 5 cases, say rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, which I've seen someone do, and that gets absolutely ridiculously huge. So over here, we have a smaller solution. And this is just an example. Obviously there's more practical stuff that you can do with this. But if we look at the game of rock, paper, scissors, it is rotationally symmetric. And by this I mean that, say player 1 chooses a value. We'll just call them 1, 2 and 3 for the moment. So say player 1 chooses 1. If player 2 chooses a value that's 1 higher, say paper, then player 2 wins. If player 2 chooses a value that's 1 lower, which since we can extend this in either direction, so it would be scissors again here, so if player 2 chooses a value that's 1 lower, then player 1 wins. And this is true for all values that player 1 can submit. So if the 2 values are equal, player 2, it's a draw. If player 1 is 1 lower than player 2, then player 1 loses, and if player 1's 1 higher than player 2, player 1 wins. And that's very simple, and we can use modular arithmetic to tell the output who's won rather. So here we have 2 lines, and for convenience this line is 3 blocks longer than this line. So this signal here will be between 4 and 6, and this signal will be between 1 and 3. But the actual distances don't really matter so long as this one is always going to be 3 higher for the same possibility than this one. Yeah, my words are getting garbled. But now that we know about moduluses, the 2 lines are going to be equivalent whenever they have the same input. So rock, which is 6 over here, is equivalent to rock on player 1, which is 3, because 3 and 6 are equivalent modulus 3. So we subtract one from the other, and this gives us a value between 1 and 5, and then we do something which is almost like the modulus function, but not quite. So if we look here, we have a comparator, which will transmit if it receives a signal that is greater than or equal to 4. And that will take 3 off the value. Now, no, we aren't taking the same value off. And basically what this is doing is it's taking 1 off all of the numbers which we input, doing the modulus of that, and then adding 1 onto the output. So if we have 3 as the input, which is what we get if they draw, which would be equal to 0 modulus 3, instead of getting 0, which is not hugely useful for computing terms because it's hard to tell whether it's 0 or just neither player has placed anything. So instead of getting a 0, we want to get a 3. And we do this by taking 1 off, and then we do the modulus, which will send 3, which has gone to 2, because it's not higher than 3, and then we move it back up. So this gives an output range between 1 and 3. And we can see this out here. They are drawing currently, rock and rock. If we place paper for P2, then P2 is winning. And say we put scissors for player 1, now player 1 is winning, and this works for everything, and it's also very small. And the extension for 5 cases is to put these up so one line is 5 longer than the other, and then we want it to take off 5 if it's greater than or equal to 6, and this would give you 5 outputs. And then you could do modulus 3 on them, again, if you wanted, or you could just label 2 of the outputs for player 1 win and 2 for player 2 win, and just bus them together. So yeah, this is pretty handy, I'd say. Well, not necessarily useful, but it certainly makes a lot of circuits a lot easier, and this was just a simple demonstration to show why some of these functions are important, because it may all seem a little bit abstract. But yeah, I hope you've learned something from watching. I'm going to give you all of the schematics in the doobly-doo, and probably the world download too, because it doesn't really matter if you see the stuff that I'm working on, and it's easier to view than the schematics, to be honest. So yeah, you're going to get the world download and the schematics, and then I hope you have a nice day, I guess. There's nothing really else to say. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.